What's up, everybody? Welcome to Move the Sticks. DJ Buck back with you, Buck. What is going on, man?
Not too much, DJ. Football weekend is upon us, and it's always great when college kicks off because to me, that's really the start of football season. And to have that full weekend without the distraction, I would say, of pro ball should be a lot of fun. And there's some big games and some good games. And when you're working over Labor Day weekend, doesn't get much better than that.
Yeah, and we've got football Thursday through Monday, so it doesn't get much better than that. If you love college football, this is one of the best weekends of the year. We'll get to some of those matchups we're looking forward to on the college side of things, but we are going to start out on the NFL side of things. Let's start, first of all, Buck, we kicked this around in our previous episode, but New England Patriots decided to be careful. They are not going to rush Drake May out there with a suspect supporting cast. I think we had both kind of evolved in our opinions on that, where I thought, man, you risk maybe losing the locker room a little bit just because he'd been so much better than Jacoby Brissett. But it sounds like long-term thinking won out here to preserve Drake May and avoid taking a beating behind that group that's in front of him.
Yeah, I understand it, but I can't say that I like it. I think every situation and circumstance is different, and I do understand long-term planning, long-term thinking with your franchise quarterback. And given Elliott Wolf's history with the Green Bay Packers and how they traditionally have redshirted young quarterbacks before giving them an opportunity, I understand that being kind of like drilled into your head, like this is the way that you go with a quarterback. But there's a part of me that just looks at how they performed in the preseason, and it's just so hard to say that, hey, man, we're going with Jacoby Brissett. Everyone in the locker room get excited. And I've liked Jacoby Brissett throughout his career, but, man, he wasn't good in this preseason. He just wasn't good. And so, yeah, I mean, I understand you want to use him as the piñata, but sometimes, man, like you learn from the failures. And maybe I'm just coming fresh off of listening to a Rick Pitino podcast where he talked about failure. Failure is fertilizer is what he said. And so he talked about how the failure can like help you grow and do some things that maybe we should put Drake May out there, particularly because if we don't think the team is going to be good, he'll have an opportunity to grow with the team and grow with some of the young players that he's going to play beside on the perimeter.
Well, I also think that, you can't have two things be true. You can't be saying, as they've said out of New England, that people are underestimating the talent here, as they were talking about how bad this group is. And I don't remember if it was Elliott or who, if it was Coach Mayo or whatever, there had been a pretty sturdy defense of the pieces that they had in place there. But then make a decision not to play the best quarterback because you want to protect them because the talent's not any good. So you can't have both those things be true. And I think we all know. I think we all know if you look at this roster, there's a lot of holes and a lot of work to be done. So I get the logic behind it. Protect him, and maybe that's 4 weeks, 8 weeks. I don't think they're going to have the stomach for it to sit him the whole year. I think eventually, especially, and I know it's a quote-unquote new regime, but Gerard Mayo's spent his NFL life in that organization where they have won a lot. And he's not going to want to park his car in that same parking lot, walk into that same building where he's done nothing but win for the majority of his adult life and get his teeth kicked in before wanting to try something new, especially knowing that the guy that's sitting is way more talented than the guy that's starting.
Yeah, and look, it's not a one-size-fits-all thing when it comes to the quarterbacks and young quarterbacks. And I do understand, obviously, because I'm close to the Drake May situation, having watched him at my alma mater, knowing that he enters the league with not a lot of experience and how it could be a recipe for disaster if he gets too much too soon. But then I also think about being in that locker room and the choices, and everyone goes to practice, and you look at the two guys, and you see the young guy with the big arm and the talent and the potential impossibilities of what could happen if he's a quarterback versus what you're getting in Jacoby Brissett. And the leadership is there. The leader guy, the managerial guy works when the team is a little better. When the team isn't as good, then you need the quarterback to be more of a playmaker that can kind of help you out. And maybe it's a one-game thing, maybe it's a 4-game thing, but I do believe at some point Drake May is going to have to get the ball for this team to be able to win and be competitive in games.
Yeah, it's the driver of the car, right? You know what I mean? You're kind of looking at it going, oh, this car's so nice. Hey, just nice and easy here. Keep it nice and easy. There's lots of horsepower in this thing. And there's other ones that you got to drive your butt off, man, because we ain't got the same machine that they got on the other side over there.
And they don't have the same machine. And DJ, like, there's a part of me that was thinking, like, okay, there's something that's going to happen to help them upgrade. They're not going to go into the year with the cast of playmakers that they have on the outside.
I'm more concerned about the offensive line, even more so than that.
All of it is doesn't look great on paper, right?
No.
The offensive line really struggled. You have people out of position and those things. And perhaps, and I know they finished bad last year, but maybe, man, the 20 years of brainwashing that the Patriots are always going to be okay. They're always going to be in the conversation. You look at the roster and, like, you know, the sum doesn't necessarily match the individual parts, and you're just trying to figure out how they're going to do it. But maybe it's an acknowledgement that, hey, man, right now they don't look like they're going to be a very good team. And so what you're doing is you don't want to sacrifice the kid, knowing that you're going to put him behind a team that doesn't have an opportunity to really win.
No question. Well, that's what's going on in New England. It is going to be Jacoby Brissett there. I want to get into the makeup of these 53-man rosters, but one other topic I want to hit you on before we get to that. I think we've got a chance to see a sequel this year. We saw and I guess it would be the opposite of the first movie. But you remember when we had the Penei Sewell, Jamar Chase discussion with Cincinnati?
We did. I do remember.
Now, and then we know they take Jamar Chase, the receiver. It works out great. Obviously, now we've seen Detroit as one of the best young teams. I'm picking to win the NFC, and Penei Sewell's an elite player, has been paid like it, and it's worked out for both. It's worked out for both. But there was a heated debate on whether the Bengals should have taken an offensive tackle or a wideout. They took the wideout. On the other side of it, this last year, the Chargers, they move on from their wide receiver core. Keenan Allen is now a Chicago Bear. Mike Williams is now a New York Jet. They were sitting there at the top, in the top 10, with a choice to be made there between the wide receiver or do they take the tackle. They took the tackle. So they did the opposite of what Cincinnati did, and they take Joe Alt, who's been excellent, moving from left to right tackle, and a chance to give them really, really a really good young offensive line with Rashawn Slater on the other side. But you got to see what happens with the receiving core. Who's going to be able to emerge? Is it Josh Palmer? Is it Ladd McConkey? Is a rookie coming in there? Is Quentin Johnston? Does a light come on for him? But that was really the same decision for two different organizations. They made the opposite decision. But I think of the way I get to this is I think of a team like the Patriots, who, and we're fast forwarding way beyond the season now, getting to the next draft. They're going to be in that situation as we look off into the distance of, do we try and get a playmaker, or we try and get some protection, and how you build around a quarterback. It's a fascinating discussion, but I just think this league has a lot of copycat. It's a lot of cyclical, and and there's going to be a lot of teams paying attention to that, what's going on with the Chargers.
Yeah, DJ, like this debate is one that is really interesting, right? Because we've talked about the wide receiver, I would say, renaissance or resurgence, where these guys are getting paid, and they have become, outside of the quarterback, they become like the second most essential piece to the offensive puzzle. But then there's another part of us that come from the college game and evaluating that, where we're like, man, the pipeline is full of wideouts.
Oh, yeah.
That is not the one position that you have to say, like, hey, we can't, we can't find a replacement or whatever. And so I'm struggling with the amount of $30 million wide receivers that we're seeing, and how these guys are holding out 2 years before you really have to pay them. And I'm trying to figure out, like, hey, when are we going to get back to, hey, the better the quarterback, the better the offensive line. The easier pieces are to find the guys on the perimeter. Like, when are we going to get to building the team that way? Because that will give you an opportunity maybe to have more sustained success than, hey, I got the sexy weapons on the outside. We're going to throw it all over the yard, but we can't run the ball, and we can't protect the biggest asset, which is the quarterback.
Yeah, I think everybody's paying attention, and I think it also helps with some of these wideouts. And we could say, okay, the depth, there's so many of them, you can wait on drafting them. But there's also saying, man, if I can get an elite one in the draft, if Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze end up being elite, man, I've got a bargain. You talk about saving, versus the $35 million tag at the top of the market. I got these guys for 5 years making nothing, even as first round picks.
Right. And so it goes back to the thing. So it's not the devaluation of the position, but actually it's the economic savings of, hey, man, let's just go draft these guys high. Like, let's draft them high, because even we're talking 25, 30 million over a 5-year term, over a 4-year term that we're talking about for a Marvin Harrison Jr. compared to $34 million a year for CeeDee Lamb. And I like CeeDee Lamb, but $34 million a year. DJ, what kind of production do we have to get to justify that number on paper? Like, he has to put up 115 catches, 1,700 yards every year to really validate a $35 million price tag. And that's elite. I don't know if the compensation is ever going to match up to the production that you want when you're paying that much money. Before, we were talking about quarterback money. I get that. But now when you're paying that kind of money for a wideout, I mean, you're almost forced to feed the number one receiver to justify the bottom line. Because how else do I go to the owner saying, hey, yeah, I know we're paying him $35. And today he only had 4 catches for 35 yards. But it's well worth the investment. That's a hard sell for me.
Well, the question is, these guys finish these contracts out, and you look at the teams that have big time quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes, obviously, Tyreek Hill, they moved on, believing in the quarterback, and they still haven't slowed down, haven't skipped a beat. You look at Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, out, gone. Justin Herbert, those two receivers we just talked about, gone. Wow. That's a belief in the quarterback, and that's kind of what we're talking about. Nabil, of course, put it in the chat, a Packers note about how their 6 receivers only make $8 million total. Devontae Adams, right? They let him go. So a lot of teams have invested in these guys. We've seen that. These contracts are rolling in. CeeDee Lamb's the latest. We'll see what happens with Jamar Chase. Ayuk's still waiting out that whole situation. But a lot of these other teams have said, okay, thank you for your service. We got a nice price controlled contribution from you, but now it's a little rich. So we got big time quarterbacks. We'll go get the next one.
Okay, so let's have this conversation then. If we're willing to pay and maybe overpay for the wide receiver, is that an indictment on the quarterback that we have? Are we overpaying for the wide receivers because we don't believe that our quarterback can elevate the players on the perimeter? Maybe that's the discussion that we have to have. When you're team building, you have to be able to look at who is more responsible for the success in the passing game. Is it the quarterback or is it the playmakers? And then it goes back to our original discussions from a decade ago. Truck or trailer?
Yeah.
If I have a truck, do I need the other stuff? If I have a trailer, I absolutely need it. So then when we look at the teams, and I'm not trying to get the people mad at me because I don't want the Philadelphia Eagles fans or the Miami Dolphins fans to come at me. But let's talk about the Philadelphia Eagles and Jalen Hurts.
Paid both of them. You played both receivers.
You pay A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Yes, you paid Jalen Hurts. But did you feel like you needed to pay the wide receivers because you don't believe that Jalen Hurts can elevate anonymous John Doe wide receiver? Or do you feel like he needs those pass catchers on the perimeter for him to be at a level that he can play at almost an MVP level?
And I would go into the past. I will go into the archives to give you the answer to that. I think if you look at the two teams that dominated the previous era, it would be Peyton Manning's Colts. It would be Tom Brady's Patriots. And what that showed you is there are two different schools of thought, both Hall of Fame quarterbacks. Peyton wanted his guys. He wanted Marvin Harrison and Reggie Wayne. Pay him whatever you need to pay him. We can cut the costs on the offensive line. We can cut the costs elsewhere. Give me these guys, and we're going to score a zillion points. Continuity matters with me, and we're going to roll. New England took the opposite approach. That was a revolving door at wide receiver. We're going to always have, the best of our ability, a really good defense, and we're going to rely on Tom to make those other guys around him better. And maybe the stats aren't going to match up with what Peyton does, but we have a formula that works with him where we're not going to pay that position. So I think you could look at the Eagles and they could say, hey, we feel like we can duplicate, obviously different style of quarterbacks, but what the Colts did with Peyton. And then I think you look at a team like the Chiefs with Andy Reid, who said, I want to be the Patriots. So there's two different ways of doing it. I don't know that there's a wrong answer there.
That's really a great observation. And what it does is, as a team builder, you have to pick, because I believe there are only two ways that you can build it. You can build it the way that we're talking about, one, the Peyton Manning way, or the Tom Brady way. If you're going to build it the Peyton Manning way, where we're going to load up and put the playmakers around them, now your premium is on your evaluators to find two marquee pass rushers And then the rest of the defense has to be homegrown guys that you're plugging and playing from your draft picks and those things. So that's the way to do it there. Whereas with the Patriots, it was, we're going to invest in the defense. We're going to make sure that we have like blue chip players on defense. We're going to play good complementary football. And then a quarterback, you got to find a way to make enough plays for us to win games. But the defense is going to keep the score down so that you only have to make a handful of plays to be able to win it. And with the exception of the year when they went and got Randy Moss to go with Wes Welker and that crew, they were more of a complementary football team that won because all three phases worked together, where the Colts were heavily driven by their offense because that's where the money was and that's when you do it. So it just depends on, as a team builder, which style do you want? And I think a lot of that depends on which quarterback do I inherit or which quarterback do I select. That determines how we have to build the rest of our team.
I also think, Gronk was the Hall of Fame player. They didn't move on from him. They kept him. They weren't going to move off him. But the rest of them, they had unbelievable runs. Insert, all those slot receivers. There's a zillion of them, and they all were successful.
Okay. It's funny because you talked about the Patriots and Kansas City and how Andy Reid wanted to be the Patriots. Travis Kelce. Kelce is a constant. Everybody else revolves around that. Hall of Fame tight end. That is the number one option in the passing game. And then they filled in the spots around him to allow this offense to have success.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And you think about Patrick Mahomes has taken, I know the numbers look big, but if you look at the breakdowns of those contracts, every agent will tell you he's taken less. Tom Brady notoriously took less. There's a lot of similarities from what those high-flying Chiefs were, put those to the side, of what the Chiefs kind of evolved into. There's a lot of similarities to the Patriots in how that defense, secondary smothering, like nobody would connect those two, but that's kind of who the Chiefs have morphed into.
Well, also, else is very, very similar? 3 Super Bowls in a 5-year span, back-to-back, looking for a third. Maybe there is something too. We're not necessarily trying to be them, but we can take some of that blueprint and kind of make it our own and find a way to be a dominant dynasty in this new era.
Yeah, I don't know that anybody's really connected those two franchises, but that's kind of where we are right now with the Chiefs. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. We come back. We're going to look at some interesting nuggets from the 53-man rosters that are still really truthfully being finalized, but some research that our buddy Jack came up with, which I thought was fascinating. We'll get into that as well as a couple college games we're looking forward to this weekend right after this. All right, Buck, some interesting little nugs here. We have the 53-man rosters as they were initially set. Now, there's been some changes since then, but a couple interesting nuggets. How about this one? The New York Football Jets have 14 former first-round picks on their initial 53-man roster. It would be 15 if Hassan Reddick would report. 15! So 14 now. Reddick shows up. That's 15. 6 homegrown first-rounders picked by Joe Douglas. So that's Elijah Vera Tucker. That's Sauce Gardner. That's Garrett Wilson. That's Johnson, the edge rusher. That is from the 22 class. You got Will McDonald in 23 and Olu Fashanu in 24. You've got 2 that were there before Joe was there with Quinnen Williams and C.J. Mosley, although C.J. Mosley has ties to from Baltimore. 2 former 49er D linemen that were first-round picks that Saleh knows, with Kinlaw coming over to join Solomon Thomas. And then 3, we classify those as win-now guys added over the last 2 off seasons. That's Aaron Rodgers, that's Tyron Smith, that's Mike Williams. And then 1, take a flyer on somebody in Tack McKinley, who's been awesome for them in the preseason. But, man, you talk about going back to that old Raider philosophy, that Al Davis philosophy of collecting as many first-round picks as you can. That number seems ginormous to have that many guys, first-round picks.
DJ, that's 25% of your roster, like over 25% of your roster, 30% of your roster are first-round picks. It has taken Al Davis's creed and going to the nth degree. Having learned about that from being around Ron Wolf as a player and hearing some of the philosophies of whatever touted, like Al Davis always believed that if someone is drafted in the first round and it's a consensus that it was a first-round talent, your job as an evaluator and team builder is to kick the tires to see if a new environment, a new scheme, or a new voice can unlock the talent that may have not realized its potential at a previous spot. But the talent is there. And DJ, we've been doing this long enough to know it is rare that someone is a flat out failure as a number 1 pick because the talent was misevaluated. There may
Yeah.
be other things that prevent them from living up to that first round potential, but it's rare that the talent is misevaluated by 32 teams in the league and you just flat out bust on that. Character, mentality, competitiveness, any of those things can impact it. So when you're the Jets and you just talk about collecting talent that will enable you to compete at a championship level, the talent is certainly there. Now you got to shepherd it and get it together and make sure everyone is going in the right direction. But when you have that many first rounders, it's remarkable. It is the equivalent to college teams having a boatload of 5 stars. When
Yeah.
we look at the way championship teams are built at the collegiate level, follow the recruiting, and it normally leads to which teams are going to be in the playoff. We'll see how this plays out for Joe Douglas and the Jets. But you can't go wrong having talent. That gives you a chance. Now you got to put it together and get it right.
But here's the other side of it. The Rams coming off a playoff season. Obviously, the Jets weren't a playoff team last year, the Rodgers injury. Rams have a league low 3 former first rounders, 2 of whom they acquired this past offseason. Tre'Davious White as a free agent, Jared Verse, which was their first round pick since 2016, since Jared Goff. They only had 2 former first rounders play in their playoff game last season. That was Stafford and Aaron Donald. And they had 3 on the roster, but Carson Wentz did not appear in the game. So you have, that's one philosophy. The other philosophy is, man, you talk about teaching and developing, and there's a reason why Sean McVay gets mentioned as, if not the best coach, top 3 coach in this league, not only for play calling, Buck, but for what they do as a staff with him at the head of teaching and developing guys that don't come in with the same pedigree.
Okay, so what we talked about previously is star chasing. We talked about the first round picks and making sure you have all the blues based on talent and pedigree. What you're doing with Sean McVay is, I would say, the definition of draft and develop, or just putting a lot in your developmental process and saying that I want the best team, not the best collection of talent. And it's such a great thing to pull up that, because you're talking about the polarization of the team building process. The Jets and the Rams. And a lot of what you're doing, if you're the Rams, as a general manager and a coach, and they're working in lockstep. You remember how we always talk about the coaches you got to scout the coaches? Like,
yeah,
you got to scout the coaches. You have to know what coaches you have in the fold. If you're Sean McVay and Les Snead, if you're going about it this way, then the guys on your coaching staff have to be some of the best teachers in the business to be able to cultivate young talent that is drafted outside of the first round, and to get them to the point where they can compete with some of the heavyweights in the league. That is about what you do in between the lines. That is about helping them become better players on the grass, and then trusting that, one, you're going to throw them in the game, but you also have the ability to coach them through their mistakes as they become better players down the line.
Yeah, I mean, it's 2 different philosophies, and I think what you have as coaches and what their strengths are, and some of them you got to arrive as ready-made, package is clear, no assembly required, and the other ones, hey, there's something we can work with here. I was perusing the rest of these numbers and some other interesting nuggets here, like the Houston Texans. Man, they've got 10 ones and 10 twos, so that's a lot of high-end guys in terms of first and second rounds with the Houston Texans. The Bengals, they have 21 former day 2 picks. That's the most among all teams. So the second and third round, which we've always said is kind of like the best value picks, because you're going to find a lot of starters in those rounds. If you can accumulate a bunch of picks in that range, it's the best value. They don't cost much in terms of the money, and the hit rate's still decently high. That is a sweet spot. I think the Bengals, they've done a really nice job of collecting guys in that range.
So it's funny. We were in the league scouting, but there was a study that came out, and I cannot remember who authored the study, but I do remember talking about it internally when I was with the Carolina Panthers, but also talking to Rick Smith from the Houston Texans when he was a general manager about it. But there's a study that found there wasn't a noticeable difference between first rounders and second rounders when it came to the talent wise. And they were saying that if you could accumulate more picks in the second and third rounds, your odds are about comparable to if you just invested in the first round talent. So if you're the Cincinnati Bengals, who's really collecting a bunch of second and third rounders, what you're doing is you're giving yourself more lottery chips, more lottery tickets to find blue chip players, because there's not that big of a difference. And a lot of times in the second and third round, there may be a medical issue. There may be a slight thing that causes you to ding a person out of the first round, but then you can take him in the second round because the money changes on draft day. Just really interesting observation when it comes to looking at how these teams are electing to build their teams. There's no right way, but I'll say there are a lot of intriguing ways that teams are going about it.
Yeah, last little nugget on the 53-man rosters. Carolina Panthers have the most undrafted players on their team, 17, which, we'd say that's one of the least talented teams in the league, so maybe that shouldn't be a surprise. But in their defense, the team right below them, there's a few tied with 16, including the Detroit Lions. And I think the Detroit Lions is a team that is one of the best in the NFL. We'd say one of the most talented teams in the NFL. I think they have a nice balance of their blue chip players as well as some hungry, undrafted free agents are like, Buck.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you talk about chip on your shoulder. You made it. You make it as an undrafted player. There's an edge to you. There's a chip on your shoulder. So I don't want to bury the Panthers for having the most undrafted players because the team that's right there behind them is one of the best in the league, the Detroit Lions. And some of that is, about scouting as well, is identifying the right guys after the draft that come in, whether it's traits based, whether it's just high floor players, two different ways to look at it. But it's just an interesting little nugget there.
So two things about the Carolina Panthers that would stand out to me. One, Dave Canales spent a lot of time working with Pete Carroll. You think about how Seattle Seahawks were built and became the powerhouse that they became in the 2010s. It was on the heels of a lot of undrafted players making the roster and developing and playing roles. Two, Dan Morgan was working in Seattle. And so they're in lockstep when it comes to giving opportunities. This, having been in Baltimore, we all talked about $500 handshakes and an opportunity to come and compete. When you have that kind of environment, everybody has to be on board with that. General manager, coaches, scouts, everybody has to be, hey man, best players play. And it doesn't matter what pedigree they come in with. When they walk in the building, we're going to evaluate them based on what they do between the lines. It's a unique way of doing it, but it's really a meritocracy if you create an environment where you're just taking the best players and giving everybody an opportunity to earn their way onto the roster.
So interesting nugget here. If you look at the number of players that made 53s, so in round one, there's 265, okay? In round two, 230. So a difference of 35. That's not a massive difference there. Then you go from the second round to the third round. There were 230 in the second round, actually 234 in the third. So more third rounders than second rounders, which, again, let's put this in context here. If you've got a chance to trade back in the second round, do it. Absolutely.
You can find a comparable player. You can find a comparable player. Yep.
You might find a better player. But having more numbers, that's a sweet spot of the draft. There's literally no difference between the second and the third round based off of this. So while there's a little drop off from 1 to 2, it goes the opposite way from round 2 to 3. Now here's where the drop is. From the third round with 234 players, the fourth round, 182. So that's a sizable difference. So there's a big difference between round 3 and 4. That would be the cutoff point. Round 5 goes from 182 in the fourth round to 172. No difference. Fourth, fifth round, no difference. But from round 5 to round 6, from 172 to 140, pretty big gap. And then finally from round 6 to 7, from 140 to 89. So those are kind of the inflection points. There's a big difference between a 6th and 7th round pick, and there's a big difference between a 3rd and 4th round pick. I thought that was interesting.
Okay, DJ. So based on what you're telling me, if I'm a team builder, just off of that information, what I would do is I'm mortgaging the farm to get picks in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd round. And then after that, I don't care. I'm going to then go and get all my other opportunities in the free agent market. Because based on the numbers, my odds of finding a player in the what we call the developmental stages, because in the room, we always say, if you drafted in the 4th through 7th round, you're a developmental prospect. I have just as good of an opportunity finding an undrafted player that gives me a return on my investment as I would in the 4th through 7th rounds. So why not trade those 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th round picks to put myself in the 2nd and 3rd round where I could get more players that are more likely to make my team and make a contribution. And then even though I lose those picks on day 3, I'm going to then mine the free agent market to make up for the developmental guys that I may have lost out on by giving up a draft capital.
Yeah, that's a lot of different strategies you can take. I mean, I think to me, the biggest takeaway is round 2 and 3, I'd put in a bucket and say, man, as many as I can collect in round 2 or 3, there's no difference. And if it means I get a 2 or I get 2 threes, I'll take 2 threes. There's no difference. There's no difference between the third and the second. I'll give me the threes then. I'll take more threes. And the other one is there's no difference between the 4th and the 5th round. Again, you're trading back. Say, I'll give you a 4. I'll take, you got 2 5s. I'll take 2 5s and something else. My odds are not much different from the 4th to the 5th round. So it colors your thinking a little bit in terms of even trades and what you're thinking of accumulating there. But I know one thing, I'd be that 3rd round to me, that might be the absolute sweet spot of value that you can find.
Okay, so let's go all the way back to when we were in the building and in the business. You remember, like, we would always talk as a team, we got to get it right the first 3 rounds. Like the bulk of our team needs to be comprised of the first 3 picks. We got to nail the first rounder because we got to have starters. 2s and 3s, they got to be eventual starters if our team is going to be any good. We will say this, and we probably shouldn't say it publicly. If you find something outside of those 2 rounds, man, that's gravy. If you find a start in the 4th round, 5th round, 6th round, or whatever, that's gravy. But in those first 3 rounds, we got to do it. Now on TV, sometimes we can get frustrated because everyone in TV talks about playing the hits, right? So when we talk about prospects on the thing, we end up talking about the same prospects. It's the same guys off the top 100 list or whatever. But DJ, maybe if we are in the building, maybe we should focus on the top 100 because that's where the players are coming from more so than the other stuff.
Yep. And the last point that I'll make, and we'll move on to college. If you've paid attention, you've noticed over the last couple of years what's become a new trend. That is pick swaps. So in other words, I'm not going to trade you a 4th round pick for a player. I'm going to trade you a 3rd round pick, but you're going to give me back a 5th round pick. So in other words, I don't net out. I still have a pick. I still have the same number of draft choices I had before. You moved up in the draft. I've moved down in the draft, but we still have the same selections. The teams that are doing that are incredibly smart in terms of the teams that are still maintaining a pick. Because if you look at this data and check it out, you're like, you know what? We want this player. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll give you our 3. You give us back your 4. And what they've looked at and realized there's no difference. I'm getting the player for free. You can have my 3rd. I'll take your 4th. The odds of me hitting on somebody that's going to make my team are no different in that standpoint. So, or I should say from a 2 to a 3 is an interesting one because that is actually, you're more likely to hit on somebody that's going to make your team in the 3rd round than the 2nd round based off these numbers. So that's you see it all the time. How many times have you seen that in the last year of teams with a pick swap? And that's why a 6 and a 7, I'll take the player. I'll give you my 6. You give me back your 7. I just got the player for free.
I mean, basically, that's what it is. I mean,
it is what it is.
If it makes you feel better, you can have this pick. I'll throw the pick in. Give me the player. We can go about it. It's man, look, it's so fun to break this stuff down when it comes to the 53-man roster and to think about how your favorite team has elected to build their team. Do they build it, like keeping onto their own draft picks where everyone that's a draftee makes the team? Are they willing to play the best player? And so it doesn't matter if you have a 5th round pick, but if the undrafted guy outplays him, you're willing to keep the undrafted player on the roster and have a little egg on your face, I guess, when it comes to like maybe not selecting the right guy on draft day. Everybody goes about it differently. And that's what makes the league beautiful because you can build a championship team in a variety of ways.
I want to get over to the college stuff real quick as we wrap up because we got the first big weekend and we'll have more on the college stuff as we get deeper into the season and get a chance to talk about a lot of these players individually as we always keep our eye towards the draft. But I'm going to give you a few games here, Buck, and you just tell me which one is number 1 on your watch list this week. We've got Colorado, North Dakota State Thursday night. That's this evening. Georgia, Clemson, Texas, Colorado State, Notre Dame, A&M, Penn State, West Virginia. We have got Miami, Florida. Then we've got Sunday, LSU, USC, Monday, Florida State, Boston College. If you only get to watch one, what are you watching?
Come on, man. If I only get to watch one, I'm going to watch
Georgia Clemson. Yeah.
Like
How about
if I get two, then I'm gonna watch Prime just because I've heard so
Okay.
much about Prime and DJ. We know, like, it's one of the things that scouts love is, as a scout, when you're an area scout and you go and you just kind of know, because I just remember for years on the West Coast going through Fresno and like going through there early in August and watching them under Pat Hill, and they're just clacking and clacking.
Yeah.
And then the first week they'll play at Wisconsin or they'll play at Oregon, and you like, they have no idea.
They don't know. They don't know what's coming.
No
Boise State was the same way. Remember Boise State?
They have no idea. Like, why
Stevenson.
did you schedule?
Not
Why
smart.
did you schedule them? And you've given them a full 6-month lead up to get ready for your team. Don't do it. So the Colorado North Dakota State thing is intriguing because I'm like, one, it's a no-win game for you if you're Colorado. Because if you beat them, everyone says you're supposed to beat them. But if you lose to them, everyone is like, what you doing? And you never get credit for being a team that is always in a national championship hunt on a lower level. Don't schedule them, man. Don't schedule.
I know. And I know, I guess it's been a minute since North Dakota State's had one of those big wins because South Dakota State has kind of taken over supremacy there. Montana State's been really good, but I still don't want to play them because of the history, the tradition, and the toughness that those guys have. I will say my next game, I'm gonna put a tie. USC LSU, I'm curious. LSU's much better on paper, but I'm curious for the fact of what we had talked about previously, which was I want to see Lincoln Riley having access to Miller Moss's headset at the line of scrimmage. I want to see, this is going to be the first time that I've seen Lincoln Riley play quarterback in a college football game, because I really think he's going to get to play quarterback through that headset. That's the fascinating thing for me on the SC. Plus, they have all those young receivers. But I mean, LSU's loaded. They have the 2 tackles. They've got Perkins. I mean, they're stacked. They're a better team. They should win that game. But I'm curious to see the offensive SC with that.
You know, I want to see what that looks like. But you know what I really want to see from SC? I want to see if SC has the ability to get gritty, right?
Yeah.
Because they're going into a league in the Big Ten that's going to be a different league than they played in the Pac-12. Like the Pac-12, they want to throw it around the yard and do that stuff. But the Big Ten is still like, look, it's in the Rust Belt. They want to run the football. It's 3 yards in a cloud of dust. And this is going to be, even though it's the SEC taking on LSU, but this is going to be like a little tasty cake for us in terms of, is USC tough enough? DJ, I think if you asked anybody who's been around in higher football levels about SC, they always will celebrate their talent. But the thing that you always question of late, are they tough enough? Because my thing is, I think they're talented enough, but are they tough enough to deal with the teams that they would have to face in the playoff? This will be our first opportunity this year to see if Lincoln Riley has built a tougher, more physical team that could go outside of the West Coast and compete at a high level.
Yeah, I'm curious to see. Now, LSU's defense did not play well last year. I don't see that repeating itself. I am excited to see Nussmeier at quarterback, see what he does. How about these two teams, man? Underlying storyline there. Number 1, number 2 picks in the draft, quarterbacks. The last 2 Heisman Trophy winners gone.
How about that?
So what does that look like with their new quarterback? So that would probably be my second game. And then third, if I'm being honest, having taken a visit to Gainesville this summer, Florida has the toughest schedule I can ever remember seeing in college football. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it, with the gauntlet that they have to run. And I just think this kind of, this is kind of a test here right out the chute against Miami. If they don't win this game, even Miami is a really good team. They're 19th in the nation. It only gets harder from here. Like, this feels like a must-win game for Billy Napier right out the chute.
Yeah, so it's funny that you took the Florida angle. I'm taking the Miami angle, right? So I'm taking the Miami angle just from Mario Cristobal left what was a really good program in Oregon to go back home and to rebuild his alma mater. And through two seasons, it's been okay, but it hasn't been what we thought.
Not what they thought.
It was going to be. The U is back or whatever. I want to see, is the U ever coming back? Are they ever coming back? Are they going to be the team that we talked about, like not in our childhood, but in our teens, in our mid-20s, where they were the dominant program? They were the program that everyone looked to. Either you loved them or hated them, but you always watched them. Are they ever going to get back to that? Because the team that Mario had at Oregon was a physical team that was built to play with the big boys. I want to see if he can do that in Miami. Year 3, you should be able to have the foundation and the structure in place to be able to get this done. So to me, it's not only a must win for Miami, but it's a must show improve performance to me. Like, hey man, if you're just significantly better than Florida, the results should show up on the scoreboard.
Yeah. No, that's going to be a fun one to watch. I guess we should touch on it briefly here with Clemson and Georgia as a marquee matchup. I want to see Beck, what he looks like. I thought he was the best quarterback I studied over the summer. I'm curious to see he gets more opportunities this year. With the schedule being a little bit more arduous with the changes in the SEC, he's got some tough opponents on there. I think he'll get a chance to shoulder more of the load. We'll see how much he has to shoulder here. I'm curious on the Dabo side of things because they've got dudes, but much like, do you remember like the jean short era for dudes? Like, I think probably our heyday, probably 90s. Like we all could wear jean shorts, like not like short shorts, like the long, like I want to say like Bugle Boy or something.
The jorts,
yes,
yeah.
But they were the jean shorts, like you could wear them. Very comfortable, very comfortable. I would throw those on, like maybe a little Tommy Bahama shirt or something back in the day, maybe a Tommy Hilfiger. I don't remember. But there eventually you look around and like, okay, nobody's wearing these anymore. But like the portal has changed college football.
Yeah.
There's no more jean shorts. Dabo Swinney is still wearing the jean shorts, saying, you guys all moved on. I'm recruiting high school kids. They're not leaving. I'm developing them. I'm not doing the portal. And this to me feels like the kind of put up or shut up year of like, does that still work? We'll find out.
Yeah, it's interesting because I can't understand why Dabo would take that approach. Because if you go and you live in the portal, like some teams are living, every year is like a new team. And it's really hard to build a continuity and the chemistry that you're accustomed to if you're Dabo, where you talk about building a program. Georgia's somehow done it, but I would say at its core, Georgia's team is still comprised of guys that they recruited, and then they bring in some supplement, some pieces. They're more like an NFL team where you draft and develop, and then you use the portal like free agency to add to what you need. Dabo is going full scale. Hey man, we're drafting, we're developing, and we're not looking outside.
He's Chris Ballard. He's the Chris Ballard of college football right now.
He is Chris Ballard. So he's all in, and that's great. But I know the natives are getting restless because he spoiled them. Yeah. They were dominant, but it's been a minute since Clemson has been. And you know what? Like, it goes quickly. Like, it's been a minute since Clemson.
By the way, his bad years are still double-digit win years. Like, it's still pretty darn good.
I would say this, DJ. I have a greater appreciation for him as a coach now than I did when he was winning national titles. Because the job that he did, he was last year, a couple years ago, where they were like 4-4. They were kind of middling, right around 500. And then he got them to double-digit wins. He can coach his tail off. But I still feel like he's a little short when he has to play those heavyweights at the top of the thing. And does he have the quarterback that can level the playing field? He had a great stretch where he had Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence, where the quarterback could tilt the field in their favor.
Even Tyler Boyd before that was fun.
Yeah. Taj Boyd. Yes.
Taj Boyd. Thank you.
Yeah, but they haven't had that. And we'll see if the quarterback now can tilt the field and kind of get them back to where they were.
Yep. And Georgia is they're a juggernaut, man. So,
and they're smarting because they did not make the playoffs. No one's really talking about them. All the love has gone to Ohio State. And what we do know about Kirby Smart, he always looking for something to poke the bear.
Yeah. I know one thing. If you mic up both those locker rooms, it will sound a lot different before that game. Put it that way. All right. It's going to be a great weekend. I'm so pumped up for it. Buck, we've only got one more weekend off before we get to the NFL stuff, but we'll enjoy some college football this weekend. Good luck to you, to Granada Hills. Let's go get a win. Let's get to 2-0, and let's get back here and talk about it next week.
Should be fun, man. Looking forward to it.
All right. That's going to do it for us. Appreciate you guys. We'll see you next time right here on Move the Sticks.